On a stormy and dark night, a strange man secretly sneaks into a museum. Inside, a guide is showing visitors an ancient wooden mask while explaining the story of Loki, the god of mischief. He says the mask was made by Loki himself and that whoever wears it gains his magical abilities. Suddenly, something unbelievable happens. The stranger begins using powerful abilities in the middle of the museum and reveals that he is Loki. The visitors panic and run in fear. Loki moves to reclaim his mask, but when he picks it up, he discovers the one on display is only a fake. This makes him furious. In anger, he attacks the guide and shoves his face into the display case like an exhibit. At that moment, security guards rush in, but Loki shoots strong energy from his fingers. Though the guards avoid being hit, he blasts a massive hole in the floor, and everyone drops through it. The following morning, far from the city, the true magical mask floats down a river. After a while, a dog finds it and carries it away. Nearby, a couple named Tim and Tanya are visiting friends to meet their newborn child. On the drive home, Tanya asks Tim when they will have a baby, but Tim feels unprepared and says the timing is wrong. Tanya feels hurt and keeps thinking about it even after they arrive home. Soon, their dog Otis enters carrying the same wooden mask from the river. Tim ignores it, unaware of its magic. Meanwhile, Loki continues searching for the real mask because his father Odin ordered him to retrieve it before it causes trouble on Earth. Later, Tim goes to work and meets his boss Daniel, a well-known animator. Tim shares a new cartoon concept, hoping to impress him, but Daniel rejects it. After work, Tim returns home and gives Tanya a small present to apologize for their earlier disagreement. That evening, Tim must attend a company Halloween party, but he has no costume. Tanya suggests he use the wooden mask Otis found. With no better idea, Tim takes the mask with him. At the party, Tim finally puts it on, and it instantly locks onto his face. In moments, he changes into a wild green-faced character with cartoon powers similar to Loki. Filled with energy and boldness, he enters the party in an exaggerated style. He soon sees that the event is dull and lifeless. Using his new abilities, Tim leaps onto the stage and transforms the gathering into a crazy spectacle. Lights flash, music blasts, dancing erupts, and everything becomes larger and more chaotic. The guests are stunned, especially his boss. After the celebration, Tim, still wearing the mask, returns home and enjoys the night with Tanya. The next morning at work, people keep praising him for his performance, but Tim remembers nothing and feels confused. Soon his boss calls him in and says he loved the Halloween act and wants Tim to create a new animated project inspired by it. Thrilled, Tim rushes home to share the news. However, Tanya has something important to say. She believes she might be pregnant. They visit a doctor and the pregnancy is confirmed. They are expecting a baby, but suddenly Tanya feels ill. The doctor hands her a container in case she vomits. Instead of getting sick, bubbles come out of her mouth. Even after this strange event, they continue their normal routine. Eventually, their baby is born and they name him Alvi. At the same time, Loki is still desperately searching for the magical mask. Loki arrives at an old warehouse where his father Odin controls the body of a shopkeeper and speaks to him. Odin explains that a baby has been born with the mask powers and orders Loki to find the child and recover the mask quickly. The next day, Tim searches the entire house for the mask. He believes it could help him come up with new animation ideas. What he does not know is that Otis already hid the mask inside his new doghouse outside after losing his old place because of the baby. When Tim fails to find it, he leaves for work. At home, Tanya takes care of Alvi. While playing, she blows up a balloon to entertain him. Suddenly, Alvi inflates his own head like a balloon. This shows he was born with the mask abilities. Before Tanya can react, he returns to normal as if nothing happened. Otis witnesses everything and feels jealous because Alvi took over his space. At the same time, Loki turns into a bee and sneaks into the hospital to locate the magical baby. He frightens the receptionist and then takes her form to check the list of newborns from that day. With the information in hand, he begins visiting homes. Meanwhile, Tim starts realizing how difficult fatherhood is. He and Tanya spend many sleepless nights because Alvi cries non-stop. One evening, Tim is so exhausted that he almost gives the baby a light bulb instead of a bottle. Secretly, Alvi uses his powers to wake him before something bad happens, and Tim never notices. The following morning brings more stress. Tanya tells Tim she must travel for work for a full week. During the same week, the television network expects the final presentation of his cartoon. The dates match, meaning Tim must stay home alone with the baby. He asks his boss for permission to work from home, and surprisingly his boss agrees. Soon Tanya leaves in a taxi, and Tim is on his own. He tries to concentrate, but Alvi keeps crying. Nothing calms him down. Another restless night passes while his boss keeps calling about the drawings. Later, Tanya phones to check on him. When Alvi hears her voice, he becomes excited and says his first word. Tim feels proud and encourages him to say daddy, but Alvi repeats mommy again, this time in a deep adult voice. Tim is frightened. Meanwhile, Loki visits the houses on his list. Disguised as a salesman, he gives one woman a new vacuum cleaner. When she tests it, Loki secretly activates it and the machine pulls her inside. With the house empty, he checks the baby but realizes the child has no powers. It is just a normal infant who even throws a toy at him. Back at Tim's house, he still struggles to finish his project because Alvy will not let him focus. Finally, he places the baby in front of the television to watch cartoons like the Flintstones and Woody Woodpecker, even though Tanya told him not to. For now, it works and Alvy becomes quiet. Tim quickly resumes working and asks Otis to watch the baby. Instead, Otis runs outside to his doghouse and begins digging for the magical mask he hid earlier. That night, Tim falls asleep while Alvy continues watching cartoons. At that moment, Otis finally uncovers the mask. The moment Otis wears the mask, he changes into a wild cartoon version of himself. At the same time, Alvy watches a cartoon about a man who finds a frog that sings and dances only when no one else is looking. Whenever someone watches, the frog acts normal. Alvy laughs at the show, unaware that Otis, now powered by the mask, wants to remove him forever. The next morning, Tim keeps working, but none of his ideas seem good enough for the presentation. Suddenly, Alvy starts copying the dancing frog right in front of him. Tim is shocked. Then it becomes even stranger. Alvy changes his head to look like Woody Woodpecker and runs and jumps across the house. He rushes into the kitchen and Tim chases him while calling emergency services to explain what is happening. No one believes him. Tim runs to his neighbor and tells her the story, but she doubts him too. He asks Alvy to perform again as proof, yet just like the frog, the baby behaves completely normal in front of others. Desperate, Tim gently shakes him hoping for another sign, but the neighbor gets upset and throws him out. When Tim returns home, he tries to calm Alvy, but the baby grabs his leg and swings him around the room like a toy. At that moment, Otis walks in and hands the baby what looks like a toy, but it is actually a stick of dynamite. Alvy realizes it is dangerous. He blows out the fuse, makes an explosion sound with his mouth, and runs off. Otis hears the noise and believes the baby is gone, so he celebrates. Suddenly, a huge bone appears as a reward, but it is another bomb created by Alvy. It explodes. Otis survives because of the mask powers, yet he refuses to stop. He prepares another scheme using a crane and rope to capture the baby. Later, Otis enters the house ready to act. Tim sees Otis wearing the mask and holding weapons and faints from shock. Otis ignores him and heads to the nursery. He climbs to the ceiling with a rope and lowers himself into the crib. He clips a clamp onto Alvy's diaper, planning to lift him away. But before he activates the crane, Alvy quietly attaches the clamp to Otis's collar instead. When Otis starts the crane, he is the one lifted into the air. Tim wakes and tries to help, but Otis is already flying. He crashes through air vents, hits the ceiling fan, flies out a window, comes back inside, falls into a dirty tub, gets pulled into a birdhouse, and ends up spinning inside a washing machine. After all this chaos, Otis is exhausted. Alvy blows him up like a balloon and sends him out the window. This time, the mask falls off and Otis returns to normal. The house is nearly destroyed, yet Tim continues caring for Alvy and prepares to change his diaper. Then someone knocks on the door. It is Loki disguised as a delivery worker. He hands Tim a package, and while Tim opens it, he leaves Alvy alone with Loki. Loki studies the baby, but since Alvy acts normal, Loki assumes he was wrong and decides to leave. Meanwhile, Tim opens the box and a giant boxing glove shoots out and hits him in the face, knocking him out. When Tim wakes, he is desperate and takes Alvy to a pediatrician. He puts the baby in the car, convinced something is very wrong. While driving, Alvy spins his head backward and vomits a strange green liquid all over the vehicle. Tim is terrified. What he does not know is that Loki is nearby watching. After seeing the powers, Loki understands the truth. This child is the son of the mask. Soon after, Tim arrives at the children's hospital and runs inside carrying Alvy. Loki trails behind him and parks in a handicapped spot. A cop approaches him, but Loki does not argue. He knocks the officer unconscious and smashes his head against the pavement. Then he suddenly appears in front of Tim and asks for the mask. Tim insists he does not know where it is, but Loki refuses to believe him and pulls out a huge axe. At that moment, Odin takes over a security guard and scolds Loki. Tim uses the distraction to run with Alvy, but Loki quickly frees himself and blocks them by forming a massive metal wall. He then makes a giant suitcase appear and pulls out a large grenade, throwing it toward them. Alvy stretches his arms and turns them into a shield, saving them from the blast. Tim is stunned by his son's ability, but Loki continues. He reveals his true form and creates a giant fireball. Just before he throws it, Odin takes control of Tim's body and releases electric energy through him, stripping Loki of his powers. Seconds later, Alvy attacks. He extends his arms like rubber, crushes Loki between two trash cans, and tosses him inside one. For a short time, things seem calm again, but it does not last. Tim receives a call from his boss ordering him to come to the studio immediately for his presentation. In a rush, Tim heads to the TV station carrying Alvy. When he arrives, he has nothing prepared. The producers fire him instantly and throw him out. Later, Tim calls Tanya and explains everything. After such a terrible day, he says he is still glad he spent time with his son. After the call, he gives Alvi a bath, puts him to sleep, and they both drift off. That night, Loki returns. He sneaks inside and enters the baby's room. Looking at Alvi in the crib, he draws strange symbols on the wall and summons Odin. He tells him the baby is the true son of the mask and begs for his powers back. Odin agrees but gives him 1 hour to recover the mask and fix everything. Once Loki regains his powers, he begins. At that moment, the neighbor appears outside yelling. Loki frightens her by turning his head into a giant nose. The noise wakes Tim, who rushes to the crib, but instead of his baby, he sees Loki's face. Then he hears Tanya's voice, but it is Loki disguised again. Loki finally reveals his plan. He tells Tim to bring the mask to the alley within 1 hour or he will never see his son again. After that, he grabs Alvi and escapes through the roof. Moments later, Tanya comes home and finds the house destroyed. Tim, still shaken, mistakes her for Loki and attacks by accident. When he realizes it is really her, he apologizes and explains everything. She does not believe him until the neighbor arrives with a giant nose. Now Tanya knows Tim was telling the truth. They quickly decide their next move. They need to find Otis because he is the only one who knows where the magic mask is hidden. Meanwhile, Otis has already recovered the mask and is wearing it. He is even sharing a romantic moment with a neighborhood dog. Tim eventually finds him and convinces him to help rescue Alvi. Otis agrees, takes off the mask and hands it to Tim. At the same time, in a dark alley, Loki is playing with Alvi while testing his powers against the other babies. They imagine a Wild West duel. Loki pulls out a fake revolver and fires first. But Alvi's gun is real. He shoots Loki just to scare him. Loki laughs, but then Tim and Tanya arrive. They offer him the mask in exchange for their son. Loki agrees, but at the last second he betrays them and keeps Alvi. Suddenly Otis jumps and bites Loki, sending the mask flying into the air. Tim leaps up, catches it, puts it on, and transforms into the mask once again. Loki attempts to run away, but Tim uses his powers and transforms his car into a powerful machine. Tanya and Otis jump in, and they race after Loki at top speed. To stop them, Loki pulls a lever that makes the road rise like huge moving waves, but Tim keeps driving and continues the pursuit. Seeing he cannot get away, Loki heads to a boxing arena and challenges Tim to fight. Tim agrees. They begin battling. Loki knocks Tim to the ground, but Tim recovers, traps Loki inside a suitcase, locks it, and throws it into the ocean. For a moment, everything feels peaceful. Tim reunites with Tanya, who has found Alvi trapped inside a cage. She releases him and the three try to leave, but Loki suddenly returns and blocks them with a massive brick wall drawn by a magic pencil. Tim attacks with toy weapons, but Loki changes them into flowers. Loki then strikes with a giant pencil, but Tim uses an enormous sharpener to snap it in half. Still, Loki rises again. Realizing the fight may never stop, Loki says the baby should choose who he wants to stay with. He tries to win Alvi over with tricks and games. Then Tim does something surprising. He takes off the mask. He tells his son that because of him he has become a better man and that he is proud to be his father. Alvi says daddy for the first time and chooses Tim and Tanya over Loki. But Loki refuses to lose. He summons a huge hammer to crush them. Tim lifts the hammer to shield his family, but Loki makes drills burst out of it and injures him. Just when all hope seems gone, Odin appears. He says Loki's time is over and prepares to punish him. But Tim asks Odin to forgive Loki because that is what a father should do. Odin is touched by his words. Instead of punishment, he forgives Loki and takes him back to the realm of the gods. Before leaving, Odin also removes the magic mask so it can never bring trouble again. The next day, Tim visits his former boss and presents a new cartoon idea inspired by everything he experienced with his son. This time, his boss loves it. Together, they create a new animated show that becomes a major success. That night at the premiere, Tim celebrates with his family. Then Tanya reveals another surprise. She is pregnant again.